Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Soul Podcasting, the show that helps you create a podcast with purpose, clarity, and confidence without burning yourself out or losing your joy in the process. And I'm your host, Demetria, and today we're diving into one of my favorite topics, which is planning your podcast content for the new year. I know, planning can feel overwhelming, especially when you're a busy person like me, juggling work and family, a business, and a million other responsibilities. But trust me, I get it and I got you. I run multiple shows, I coach podcasters, I'm a mom, I'm a musician, and somehow planning still lights me up because it keeps me from scattering my energy all over the place. So today's episode is going to feel like a deep exhale. I'm going to give you evidence-based strategies. So we'll be using some stats and research, real life examples, and a handful of good tools and a step-by-step structure that you can start using immediately, whether you're a wellness podcaster or a copywriting coach or running a show about faith or business or literally anything else. So stick around to the end because I'm going to share in this episode where you can find my newest YouTube tutorials. I've got some practical screen-by-screen videos dropping soon that is going to pair really nicely with what we're talking about today. So let's get into it. Let's talk about why content planning matters and why most podcasters skip it. And I just want to encourage you not to skip this part. It's so important. Here's the hard truth. Most podcasts fail not because of bad ideas, but because of bad planning, sadly. So according to a 2024 Buzzsprout dataset, only 20% of podcasts publish consistently beyond their first year. And Edison Research reported that podcasts with consistent weekly or bi-weekly schedules experience up to 33% higher long-term listener retention compared to shows that publish sporadically. Consistency isn't magic, but it is part of your planning and it helps you as a podcaster to build a show for the longevity. And here's where I believe most podcasters mess up. It's that they're treating content planning like it's optional, or they're planning only week to week, which definitely leads to burnout. I've talked about burnout quite a bit. If you want to hear more about my advice on burnout, check out episodes number 32, 40, 44, and 67. All 4 of those episodes mention burnout, and I focus a good bit of my energy on helping podcasters not to burn out. So if you want to learn more about how to avoid burnout, those 4 episodes can help you. A third way that podcasters might mess up in this process of creating content is that they plan without strategy, meaning that they pick topics at random instead of intentionally guiding the listener toward transformation, towards some type of action and even loyalty to their show. So before we talk about tools and templates and episode calendars, I'm going to give you a simple reframe. So content planning isn't about being rigid. It's about creating freedom. You want freedom from scrambling around, trying to find things at the last minute to add into your show. Freedom from creative droughts where you don't have any inspiration and you just have a blank screen. It's kind of like the writer's block. That can happen definitely in podcasting. You want freedom from burnout and also freedom from, oh no, what am I going to post this week? That kind of panic. So if you want to grow next year, you definitely have to plan for the upcoming year. As I'm recording this is 2025 and we're about to head into 26. And so this episode can of course be applicable to any year that you happen to be listening to this episode. But I want to give you some personal examples of what I've done throughout the years to help me with my planning. So a few years ago when I ran my homeschool podcast, which I'm still running right now, I was doing everything off the cuff. I didn't really start off with a strategy or a calendar, just vibes, how I felt, and that was what worked for me back in 2012. And I was super passionate, but passionate without structure is chaos. So I would record at the last minute. I would rush edits. I would forget to post on socials and then wonder why my show was stalling out and it wasn't growing as quickly as I would have liked. When I shifted into podcast coaching, I finally began to build a more intentional planning system. And that Truthfully, it's changed everything. Suddenly, my episodes are more aligned with my goals. I'm not scrambling around to figure out what I'm going to post and when. My content is actually leading me somewhere. And honestly, I have a lot more peace. I flow more with my episodes. I feel good about the content that I'm bringing to the table and that I'm sharing with the world. And I really feel good that I'm sharing more of me. And so it feels really soulful. And that's what I want for you this year. So let's set a clear podcast purpose for the upcoming year of 26 or whenever you happen to be listening to this episode. So step one of planning isn't just choosing your topics, it's choosing direction. So you're going to ask yourself, what is the purpose of my podcast this year? Not the lifetime purpose, not the original purpose, but the 2026 purpose and beyond, 2026 and beyond. Some examples of yearly purposes could be that, let's say you want to grow your email list by 1,000 subscribers, or maybe your YouTube channel. Maybe that's part of your podcasting ecosystem and you're going to grow that YouTube channel in addition to your podcast listeners. Maybe you want to build a community around, let's say you are a wellness podcaster, so you want to build a community around wellness for women over age 40. If you're planning on that one, be sure to let me know. I will join your community. I will very likely join your community. So maybe your idea is to promote your upcoming book. Or maybe you want to create some evergreen content to support a digital course that you're planning to create. So once you know the purpose of your podcast for this year, then planning becomes laser focused. Many of you know that I have been softly announcing an upcoming membership that I'm creating right now. And as I'm planning out my goals for 26, I'm aligning my podcast around this membership. And I'm excited to have the course and the membership kind of be a backbone to what I'm doing here at Soul Podcasting, in addition to the coaching that I'm offering. So I wanted to create a community. And so in order to know where I'm going with my podcast, this community is going to be a staple in that it's going to be kind of the backbone of how I show up in 2026 on this podcast. Once again, once you know your purpose, then your planning will get so much easier and you'll know how to base your podcast around the work that you do. I always encourage entrepreneurs, solopreneurs to create your podcast as an extension of the work that you're already doing or plan to do. So we want to be going in the direction of making your podcast a connection and a backbone to what you're doing. It's not just this extra activity that's floating out there in the atmosphere, something that you're just kind of grabbing at because a lot of other people are doing podcasts and it just looks fun and it's just something people do and it's trendy. No, this is something that as a business owner, an entrepreneur, that you can strategically add into your workflow so that it fits into your lifestyle and your goals as a business owner. So let's say you're running a wellness show for women navigating stress and hormones and midlife changes. And let me tell you, if you are running a show like that, please let me know and I will subscribe. I am all about learning as much as I can about the stage of life I'm in right now. So that's just a plug for those of you who are in that space. But if that's where you are, let's say that your 2026 purpose could be something like help women reduce burnout through simple weekly practices. So then your content themes might include hormone-friendly habits or the science of rest or the mind-body connection, some beginner movement routines like Pilates, which is something I'm completely into right now, nutrition and maybe some myths in nutrition, or maybe how to reduce your stress, maybe some challenges. Every single episode that you create will connect back to your yearly mission for your business. I'll give you another example of another industry. Let's take a copywriting coach. If that's where you are and you're creating a podcast, let's say your purpose could be something like grow my coaching program and help small business owners write copy that converts. So then your content themes might include something like copywriting mistakes, writing email sequences, sales pages, storytelling, brand messaging, client psychology, and seasonal campaigns. And every single episode should build toward nurturing your future clients. So when you root your plan in your purpose, you stop sounding super random and you start sounding like someone that's worth following, because we want to follow your journey and find out what coaching programs, what products, what services you're offering, so we can learn and glean from your expertise. That's exactly what I'm doing with one of my favorite podcasters in the wellness industry, Jessica Vallant. I follow her because of her Pilates program that she has free resources available on YouTube, plus her podcast. And because of her podcast and her YouTube channel, I'm connected to her membership and some of the other things that she offers. So I promise you that I'm living and practicing what I preach. And if I'm encouraging you to think about your podcast in this way, it's because I see the benefits of it, not just as a producer, but as a consumer. So it's really important that we look at our podcast as part of our business ecosystem. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is to choose about 3 to 5 content pillars for the year. One thing you'll notice on my podcast is that you'll find repetitive information. I do talk about things over and over again. I'll mention it in an episode, and then maybe in about 3 to 5 episodes forward, I'll mention it again, and then maybe I'll talk about that same thing again. And you'll notice that I've talked about content pillars since 2023. And it's because it's so important, and it is a foundation for content strategy. And before I started committing to doing the work of a podcast coach, I was a content strategist, which is very similar. As a web designer and online marketer, I took those skill sets and I worked with solopreneurs to help them to strategize their web pages and optimize them and create content that made an impact for their brand. And so I'm taking that same skill set and transferring that to podcast coaching. And so I'm always going to be talking about content pillars because that is such an important part of planning out your strategy. So pillars are your anchor topics. These are the categories that your show revolves around. Now, I was looking at some research, which I'm known to really dig into research because I think it's important to know what's happening in your industry so that you can make more quantifying decisions. And so it does take me a little bit longer to decide on what to talk about or making decisions and moving forward because I actually want to look at data and research before I make a leap. So that's why I talk a lot about research here on the episodes. And I hope that you find it helpful and that it's enlightening for you. So let me know what your thoughts are. But again, let's hop into the research. And Edison Research found that shows with tight thematic consistency, meaning there are themes that are tightly niched, they have 52% higher completion rates. And why is that? It's because listeners know what to expect. So if you choose 3 to 5 pillars and you stick to those pillars for the whole year, again, with some flexibility because life does happen and maybe we have just this illumination, this grandiose idea that we want to do an episode that doesn't have anything to do with our pillars. Those exceptions are okay. But for the most part, if you're sticking with 3 to 5 pillars, this will help you to maintain a completion rate of your listeners wanting to listen all the way through your episodes beginning to end. And so here's some examples. Again, I'm using the wellness podcaster and the copywriter podcaster as examples. Fill in the blanks, make this your own, and think about what industry you're in and just plug and play for yourself. So for a wellness podcaster, those pillars could be stress reduction, movement and hormones. I know rest and sleep is important, and then maybe mindset and some type of like emotional wellness. So that could be your 4 pillars. So that falls within the 3 to 5. And then for your copywriter podcast, you might want a pillar about writing skills, or one specifically about email marketing. That will be 2. Your third one could be conversion strategy, how to convert your reader to follow through and make a purchase. So your copywriter podcaster could have those few pillars. For my specific podcast, I'm typically working on pillars like content strategy, which is something I'm talking about today, podcast growth. I often talk about podcast workflow and systems, and I also talk about storytelling and creativity. I have a few more, and I'm learning that it's important I kind of narrow those down just a little bit more, but those are things that I generally talk about. So think about what you want to be sharing with your audience and come up with 3 to 5 pillars. Once those pillars are set, you can break each one into monthly themes if you so wish. You don't have to do it this way. It's just an example to help you map out the upcoming year. So if you were to map out your year with those monthly themes, this is where planning starts feeling really creative and exciting. And again, life happens. You probably won't stick with it exactly as you've planned it out, but it just gives you an idea of what could happen. So you could give each month a theme based on your pillars. For example, January could be, if you're a wellness podcaster, it could be your stress reset month. It's a great month to reset. So January could be reset. February could be heart health and emotional wellness. March could be gut and hormone balance. April could be about movement. May could be mental health, and so on, right? Just kind of plug and play where those themes are and plug it into the right month that you think is appropriate for what you want to talk about that month. For a copywriter podcast, your January could be about the foundations of messaging. February could be about sending love to your subscribers, your email subscribers, and keeping in touch with them, right? So February, love, right? That theme. And then March, it could be your sales page, spring cleaning, right? Spring cleaning in March. So maybe throw in something about that sales page. April could be repurposing your content. May could be just whatever you are doing as a copywriter. You know what those pillars are and you add them in. So for me, I could have my January be planning and strategy. My February could be clarity, messaging, and purpose. Or I might even have purpose be January. And then in March, I could talk about more growth fundamentals for podcasting. I could do more batching in April and talk about branding and storytelling in May. So that is the kind of the idea we're going with is once you know what your pillars are, it gives you an idea of how to map out your months. You don't need to plan the entire year right away, but if you plan just 6 months, you'll be ahead of 95% of podcasters, believe it or not. All right, so let's talk about planning episodes using a simple 4-part framework. So once you have themes, you want to use this structure for every single episode. You're going to have 4 parts to this. The first is that you give a premise. You will be wanting to know what the episode is going to do for your listeners. So that's the premise you're giving. What is the premise that you're delivering for each episode? Number 2, what is the path? The pathway that you will have your listeners step through. You're going to walk them through the path, right? So you get to figure out what that looks like. Number 3 is the proof. You're going to add data, personal stories, examples. For example, if you're the wellness or the copywriter, those examples would go in your proof. And lastly, number 4 is the push. So you're going to have a clear CTA to your email list, your product, maybe a challenge you're running, or in my case, my YouTube channel today, I'm going to plug that at the end. But this framework really boosts your retention and clarity, and it means that your listeners stick around a little bit longer, and that's going to boost your algorithm and distribution. Okay, let's talk about tips to boost your plan. All right, we're going to look at research. I always love research. So the first thing that I want to recommend is that your episodes need to be scannable because NPR's 2024 training guide found that listeners stay longer when segments are clearly structured and predictable. So you want your episodes to be easily scanned. There's an intro, an outro. There's the information that you generally share with your audience, and it's pretty much the same format. Not always, but for the most part. Number 2, consistency is going to beat frequency. So podcasts that publish every other week consistently outperform weekly shows that skip episodes. So just kind of be on task, even if it's every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, once a month, at least it's consistent. The third thing is that search actually matters. So Apple Podcasts prioritizes clear titles and keywords that are topic specific. And that's why planning your titles in advance is super powerful. So keep your search and your SEO in mind. And then fourthly, repurpose increases your reach. So podcasters who actually repurpose your episodes into at least a couple of other formats for either that's your email or social reels or Instagram posts or something like that, or a blog post, will see up to 4 to 6 times more exposure, according to Podchaser's 2024 report. So your planning should include some repurposing structures. If you go back and listen to my last episode 90, I share how you don't have to be everywhere at the same time doing all the things all the time. But it is important to pick your favorite platforms and just start there and get some repurposing going. Even if it just means that you have a blog post in addition to your episode and maybe one social media outlet. All right, we're going to talk real briefly about planning tools and apps. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because there's so many options out there. You guys, I could never cover the amount of tools that are available for your use. But this is the good stuff, and it's tools that actually simplify your workflow. So pick and choose what works for you. But first, you're going to have content planning and calendars. So there's Notion, which is my personal favorite. There's infinite customization. I love it. There's Trello, and it's great for simple batching, and it's very visual. There's ClickUp. It's highly structured and it's great for teams. So I don't tend to use ClickUp. There's Airtable, which is a database style planning. And then there's Asana, which is good for classic project management. Pick and choose what works for you. Start using it to plan your content. And if you're using Google Drive, Google Docs, and Google Sheets, use it. All right, content repurposing. You might want to look at Descript for your clips and your transcripts. You may want to look at Canva for audiograms, carousels, episode promos. I'm using Canva. I'm also using a little bit of Descript. I'm using Opus Clip, and I am trying out CapCut at the moment, which is great for Reels, Shorts, and TikTok. Okay, so recording and production. So there's Riverside, which allows you to do remote interviews and high quality video and audio. I'm actually purchasing Riverside as of this month, and I haven't used it yet because I've been using Zoom, but I'm thinking of making the switch. And so that's something that you could look into. There's Adobe Podcast AI to help you clean up and enhance your audios. I use this religiously, and it has been such a time saver and lifesaver for me. So I'd rather use that than try to figure out all of the different complicated back-end tools in Adobe Audition. So I'd rather just use Adobe Podcast and have it clean it up for me. And then there's Hindenburg, which is amazing for spoken word audio. Okay, and idea management. How are you writing down your ideas? Because you're probably getting explosive ideas just walking around your neighborhood or doing grocery shopping. You might have ideas and you may need to get them down quickly. So are you using voice memos for when that inspiration hits while you're driving? Or are you using Apple Notes or Notion Idea Bank or whatever you're using? Have a system where you jot down your notes really quickly so that when you are in your office, in your studio, and you're ready to do your research for your recording, you know where to find those off-the-cuff ideas that you had in the moment when you were shopping for, dinner for the week. In fact, I do this all the time. I'll be shopping at Trader Joe's, and it's where I seem to get most of my ideas. I'll either be listening to a podcast or I'll be getting ideas about how I can add something to one of my shows and what kind of episodes I want to do next. And so I don't know why there's something about Trader Joe's and there's something about selecting cheeses and almonds and sourdough bread that just gets my mind into, I can add this into my podcast next week. Don't know what it is, but maybe it's something different for you. And I'd love to hear what your experiences are coming up with ideas. I'm just going to give you an example of what a fleshed out episode could look like. And I'll give you those two examples of those different podcasters, the wellness podcaster and the copywriting coach. Okay. So for the wellness podcaster, let's say that their episode theme for the month is stress reset in the month of January. So now, because they know what their month's theme is, they can start curating ideas for podcast episodes that month only about stress and resetting. So let's say they came up with one called 5 hormone-friendly habits to reduce stress this week. All right, well then they've created the episode, they've recorded it, it's ready to go. Maybe it's been published. So now what do they do with that episode? It's been published, but now what? Okay, so they could create an Instagram carousel called 3 signs that your cortisol is too high. They could do a reel, which is maybe a 10-second breathing reset. And they could create an email that's entitled Your 7-Day Stress Reset Plan, and then create a blog post that's an expanded version of that episode. Now, I'm just going to tell you right now, this idea came directly from ChatGPT. And so this is how easy it is for you to create your themes and to come up with content so that you can move forward with creating a podcast that is helpful for you in 2026 and beyond. From this information for the wellness podcaster, they could also then create a lead magnet, maybe a 14-day stress journal template. And this way, their subscribers could grab this template and now they're part of their email list and they're call to action would be get the free stress tracker, right? At the end of my episode, I have a link for my stress tracker. Join my list. I'll share my journal template with you, that kind of thing. So that is an example of a full episode based on knowing what their episode themes are. And then one more example I'll give you will be the copywriting coach. So let's say that their theme for the month is messaging foundations. They're going to start people from the very beginning on how to do messaging just right. So maybe the name of their episode is Stop Confusing People, How to Clarify Your Core Message in 20 Minutes. That's a really strong title, by the way. It's very eye-catching, and I would definitely want to listen to that. Okay, so the email that they could send out to their list is 3 messaging mistakes that kill your sales. I would open that email. For a carousel, they could create something like the common copywriting myths. And for their reel, it could be what your about page is really supposed to do. Their lead magnet could be 10 plug and play messaging prompts. And then they could have a CTA to join their writing workshop. Here's a personal peek behind the curtain of what I'm doing. When I first shifted soul podcasting into a more structured show, I had to unlearn the record whenever I feel inspired mindset, because I'm a creative at heart and I love spontaneity, but spontaneity alone was keeping me really small. So here's what I did. I blocked out a weekend. I made myself a cup of ginger tea. I turned on some soft lo-fi and I mapped out my next couple of months. Not every single episode, but just the direction of each month. And January was planning and clarity, and February was a bit on messaging, March was growth, and so on. And then immediately something began to click for me. Suddenly my examples were richer, my stories had more flow, I felt like my episodes were connected instead of all random. And I think, based on my stats, that my listeners were listening for longer, and I did see an uptick in coaching inquiries. So I knew that something was happening and people were more responsive and interested in what I offered. Now, this structure didn't cage me. It didn't block my creativity. It actually unlocked it. And so that's what planning does for a podcaster. I'm not saying you have to plan everything out strategically and specifically all the time. There are some moments as a creative that you just want to flow and you just want to be creative, but planning is so helpful for the most part for the long term. What planning does for a podcaster is it unleashes your creativity in ways you couldn't have imagined. So it helps you to show up intentionally and consistently and with way more peace. So your 7-step New Year podcast planning system are all the things that we talked about on this episode, which is a very long one because I wanted to give you a lot in this episode. The first is that you should define your purpose for the upcoming year. Remember, one purpose, one direction, one mission. Number 2, choose your 3 to 5 content pillars that guides everything you do. Then break the year into monthly themes. Do a 6-month minimum. Don't worry about going beyond that for now. And then brain dump 20 to 40 episode ideas. And you don't even have to use much of your brain, I promise you. Just ChatGPT can be your idea bank. Just use your AI tools to help you. Number 5, assign your episodes to themes. This is where the calendar forms out really beautifully. You're going to see your episodes kind of filling in those gaps, and you'll know what to do when it's time to get behind the mic and start recording. You want to build a repurposing workflow. So each episode has a few pieces of content, maybe 2 to 4 or 3 to 5 pieces of content, and then set up your planning tools. So that could be Notion or Trello or Google Calendar, whatever works for your brain. And if you follow these steps, I think you're going to walk into the new year with podcasting clarity. I really do. So, all right, my friend, that wraps up today's deep dive on planning your podcast content for the new year. And I hope that this gave you clarity and direction and some practical ways to just make the next season of your podcast more intentional and more impactful. Content planning isn't about being perfect. It's really just about alignment. And when you know where you're going, your podcast becomes more soulful and more strategic and sustainable for you. So if today's episode helped you, please make sure to head over to my YouTube channel, guys. I've got this new thing happening where I'm starting to add new videos. I'm dropping in new step-by-step tutorials, planning more templates and visual walkthroughs, and podcast strategy tips that are not necessarily on this podcast. So If you want extra, head over to the YouTube channel. And this is going to make your next year of podcasting, I believe, the smoothest one yet. Just search for my channel. You can type in my name in YouTube. I'm at Demetria Zinga, so that's going to be spelled out in the links, and you'll see the title of the channel is my name, Demetria Zinga, podcast coach and creative CEO. Now, of course, I'm probably going to change the name of the YouTube channel soon, but you will always see my name on that channel. So it's my business channel. I do have another channel just for moms of faith and women and homeschoolers, and that's a whole different channel under a different name. But if you type in my name and look for podcast coach, you're going to see that channel that I have for you, for those of you interested in podcasting. Be sure to check the link in the show notes, hit follow, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss anything. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for creating with heart and with soul. And I'll see you next time. Happy podcasting.